Okay, everybody. Welcome to our panel. It's been a very long day, I guess, for most of you, but also I hope a very exciting day and a very interesting day to see colleagues working on the South Caucasus and the Black Sea region. I remember from when I was a PhD student how useful it is to get out of the house and to be able to talk with other people about the details on civil society or on political parties or on governance, what that one is working on. So I hope you've had a very good day. And I hope that this panel will be quite energizing as well. The title is Obstacles and Opportunities for Conflict Resolution in the Southern Caucasus. What we're going to do in this panel is focus very much on the conflict regions. So on the conflicts in Abkhazia, South Ossetia, and Nagorno-Karabakh as they involve Georgia, Azerbaijan, Armenia, but also Turkey and Russia. We have a very distinctive people with us here today. So I think my main goal is going to be to try to keep everybody quite short so we can have an active discussion and also to have the opportunity to listen to a lot of your questions and to get interesting answers. So I'm going to start immediately by giving the word to Mr. Alexei Malashchenko, who is from the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace in Moscow. He is a very prolific writer on the Islamic world, on the North and on the South Caucasus. So let me ask him today to tell us a little bit about how he sees the conflicts and whether or not he sees any prospect for any resolution anytime soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabina. It seems that I must have 10 minutes. For me, it's enough because on the blackboard before was written about obstacles. To my mind, there is the only one obstacle, and everywhere. What I mean? I mean that this main and maybe the only one obstacle consists in the lack of final issue for the decision of the country. And more, it is impossible. And everybody knows it. Despite all conferences, all negotiations, indeed after the war we have several countries, like in Middle East. It began 60 years ago and it will continue forever. Maybe I look pessimist in your eyes, but I think that practically the same fate is for the conflicts in South Caucasus. If somebody is ready to give us a solution which will satisfy all sides, that will be wonderful. But till now, no one could propose it. That's why we invented the notion of a frozen conflict. But how much it will continue, this frozenness? Maybe forever, maybe for a couple of generations. I think it's a very productive and a very diplomatic notion. But it once again proves that we have no issue. So that's normal. Sounds very, very pessimistic, but it is so. Next problem and next obstacle. Of course, we are talking today about Caucasia, about Caucasus, yes? But don't forget that at the moment we have a little bit generalized the situation. What I mean? I mean that the conflicts in this region, this is a part of a huge geopolitical situation when we have two options: to keep integrity of state or to think more about the ways of self-determination for different people. Don't forget that we survived the collapse of the Soviet Union, the collapse of Yugoslavia, the disappearance of Czechoslovakia, the split in Sudan, and so on. It's a main trend, one of the main trends. So to think that Caucasia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, separatism is in Georgia are certain exceptions, I doubt. It's one of the trend. And even more, when I'm looking at the map of Middle East, sometimes I pay big attention to the problem of Kurds. Maybe they will be the next. If it happens, that will be koshmar for Middle East, for Asia, for everybody. Sometimes I ask myself, if may it occurs? We don't know, but it's possible. One more obstacle, maybe it's not an obstacle, but it's a certain reality. In the conflicts in Caucasia, there are winners, maybe temporary winners, but how is Karabakh? It's a victory. How could we? How could you think about Abkhazia and Ossetia? It's a victory of separatism, maybe temporary, but as I know, maybe I'm mistaken, but the majority of experts also they think that it's impossible to restore Georgian integrity. I'm not a diplomat, yes, so that's why I must be criticized. But anyway, I cannot imagine how it will go. Next, sometimes when I attempt to understand the domestic, the internal politics of Azerbaijan, Armenia, and Georgia, and Russia, by the way, because people, I mean presidents or local political elites, they understand that there is no way some back. They attempt to use these conflicts, all kinds of conflicts, as a tool, as an instrument for consolidation around themselves. Look at Azerbaijan. Well, what kind of opposition? No, it's impossible because we have a war against Armenia, because of Karabakh and so on. It's normal. It's normal because just, I repeat once again, maybe I'm mistaken, but I'm practically sure, but some little Hamaliyev cannot imagine that Nagorno-Karabakh finally will become a piece of Azerbaijan. It is over. So, if it is so, why not use this situation in order to consolidate the nation around himself? Besides for some external actors, foreign actors, the existing conflicts is also a tool to demonstrate they are participating in the Caucasian ability, to keep their positions there, in this region. I speak now about Russia, primarily. Because let's imagine if it's not Nagorno-Karabakh, if it's not relations, difficult relations, confrontations between Azerbaijan and Armenia, well, the presence, political presence and military presence of Russia, of Moscow, could be minimized. But as a mediator, as a participant in the negotiation, when both presidents are invited to Moscow to talk with Medvedev, like it happened from last year. Wow. It's a victory. It's political a victory. So without conflicts, some conflicts, the Russian position in the region will be weak. By the way, just I have time, so it reminds me of the situation in Central Asia. Why, if it's not problems in Afghanistan, if it's not some troubles inside Central Asia, Russia may lose a chance to be present politically and militarily in Central Asia. Yes, that's very simple. And because I have only 1 minute. I think that in the future, maybe in 50 years, in a couple of generations, finally world community in Caucasus, in Caucasia, they will do something. They will come to this solution. But I'm afraid that for this positive movement, we need geopolitical, tectonical movement. As example, while we can imagine everything, the collapse of Russia, the unification of Azerbaijan and Iran, or re-emergence of Ottoman Empire. So the situation is, I apologize, is very important.
Thank you very much. I think things can only get better from there. I'd now like to give the floor to Professor Alex Rondelli, who is head of, I only know the acronym, so the Georgian Foundation for Strategic and International Studies in Tbilisi. Professor Rondelli has been the professor of most of Georgia's leadership, the previous one, the new one, the one before that. So I think that he can tell us very much what they are thinking, and also perhaps tell us what they could be doing in the future. I think that Mr. Milashenko has said some very harsh things, that it will be impossible to bring back Abkhazia and South Ossetia to Georgia or Nagorno-Karabakh to Azerbaijan. I wonder, Mr. Rondelli, if you agree with that, or if you see perhaps a more positive outlook in the coming years.
The only way to outlast Alexei is to say that I'm pathological pessimist. You know, even if you are pathological pessimist, we have to act as optimistic. So in Georgia we are told first by Shevardnadze, then by Mr. Saakashvili, I think this tune will be repeated many times, that there will be a light at the end of tunnel. The tunnel is too long. I think that people speak about, is it possible to improve relations, to solve problems? I agree with Alexei that we have to look at this conflict as a part of the security environment, regional security environment, in which one country is still trying, being formidable regional power, trying to stay, is still a security environment maker, order changer, and regime changer also. And if we go back a bit to make everything clear, we have to remember the main problem between Georgia and Russia was that Russia wanted Georgia to sign so-called framework agreement. It's called Ramachny Dogovor. We have it with all our neighbors except Russia, in which Russia wanted Georgia to sign under two very strange clauses. One clause was saying that Russia keeps special rights in conflict regions. It's breaching of sovereignty. And second, both parties take responsibility not to let any third country to locate military infrastructure on their territories. When Georgia offered not to locate foreign military, they said no, third country. It was also breaching of sovereignty. So, but first part of it is achieved, accomplished, mission accomplished. Both territories are now fully under control and not special rights, even more super special rights. Now let the last part of the equation to solve, to get control over Georgia. And I don't think that it's not anymore in Russian agenda. So solving conflicts, what does it mean to solve conflicts? now at this moment? And also, what does it mean to improve relations? Now many people say blah 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 about the movement of people, opening railway, and so on. Many, selling Georgian wine, and we buy everything Russian in our republic, but they cannot buy anything Georgian. I think they are just going crazy because of that. So, what does it mean to improve relations? What does it mean to our national security? Is anyone calculating what will be the result, good or bad? Because it's only slogans, to improve relations. Cultural theater will come, we will say wonderful, we love you. They will say we love you, but we don't like Saakashvili. We know this. But what after that? Do they respect us as independent state? Do they give us any guarantees of security? And if they do, then what will be the cost for Georgia? So now many people believe that this oligarch who came to power now, they believe that this may be the instrument of Georgia's nice bandwagoning to Russia. Some believe that not, we will see, because statements are one thing, but facts are another. Analysts have to analyze facts and to see them in logical connection, not just statements. So we have to see. I believe that any Georgian leader will try to defend Georgia's national interests, but it depends. It's important how he understands them and how he defines them. So just to improve relations, why not? My brother died 2 years ago in Moscow, and I couldn't get visa to go to funeral. And only after 40 days I managed through diplomatic channels to go for this so-called 40 days. Is it normal between the nations with 200 years of coexistence or cohabitation, let alone friendship and love? So, to improve relations, yes, wonderful, we have to improve them, but to what extent and to what cost for my country, Georgia, because I have to calculate costs of my country, not Russia's. So, I think I agree with Mr. Malashenko and everything. Difficult to achieve results. We went too far. Conflicts are disastrous, and we cannot just manipulate with the destiny of others or settings, because we have to ask them what they want. We went too far. The blood is spilt. Now it's a very long way to. There was some during the war. It's a long way to prepare it, but it's a very long way to the solution. And I think diplomats have to do something. Public diplomacy, improvement of relations, but it has to be not one-way traffic. Everyone, even the countries who are regime changers and formidable regional leaders, have to understand that others also want to stay sovereign states. And it has to be mutual understanding and mutual respect. Thanks.
Oof, I think that it's the end of the day, and unfortunately this is, I think, the feeling on the ground when it comes to the conflicts in the South Caucasus. There's a tremendous amount of lack of ideas and the feeling that it's not going to be easy to come up with a solution quickly. So unfortunately I have to say that this panel is so far reflecting pretty much the feeling that I think we see in the region. But Professor Roundtable mentioned the role of diplomats and mentioned also the role that other countries outside the region could play. So I can't think of a better person to tell us a little bit about that than Ambassador Semneby, who was the EU Special Representative for the South Caucasus from 2006 till 2011. He was, of course, in Georgia during the war between Georgia and Russia, and has a tremendous amount of experience both in the South Caucasus but also in Brussels. So what I hope he will tell us a little bit about today is also What are the external powers thinking? What is the European Union, who just won the Nobel Peace Prize, thinking about the conflicts in the South Caucasus?
Well, what should I say after these presentations here? Everything is relative, I suppose, and since I have recently moved from the Caucasus to Afghanistan, I must say that things don't look so bad. Before I started my work in Afghanistan, just to get off on a tangent here a little bit, I talked to a very senior military leader and asked him whether the glass was half full or half empty in Afghanistan. We're still talking about Afghanistan here. He told me, well, it's half empty, of course, but we can never say that publicly, because then we risk creating a momentum, a dynamic that we lose control over. So we really have to make sure to maintain perception that things are that the glass is half full, and try to pivot. And I think that probably these narratives, they do play a role in terms of how the situation will develop. They do tend to become self-fulfilling, and I think it's important, therefore, to pick up also on the still relatively few positive developments, but still try to see if there are any points that we can try to where we can try to see the tendencies for some possibilities for some positive developments, and then try to work on them. The obvious change that has taken place very recently, and I think deserves some comment, is the change of government in Georgia. I do agree with both Alyosha and Alex that the basics don't change because of that. The Russian recognition of the independence of Khas and South Ossetia, I don't see any possibility that will change, at least not within the foreseeable future. Any Georgian leader will need to safeguard the country's territorial integrity. I don't see that changing either. I don't see the basic directions of Georgian foreign policy changing, the European agenda and the NATO agenda. I still think that there will be a high degree of allergy in Russia, at least to the latter part of that agenda. But at the same time, there are possibilities of changing the discourse between the countries. I think there's definitely potential for a more conciliatory tone. I think there are possibilities for Georgia to take a more open-minded position vis-à-vis engagements in the conflict regions in Abkhazia and South Ossetia, including then an international footprint in these regions in order to enable or to make it possible for them to change their view of the world, their view of themselves in a larger context, and therefore for the international to have some to enable them to move out of the very binary relationship that find themselves in between Moscow and Tbilisi. This requires, of course, a degree of trust between the new government, the Georgian government, and also the international partners that would do this. I think, in particular, that there is possibility to talk about some very concrete things, transportation issues. I can see very much of a joint interest, hard-nosed economic interest in developing communication routes South Ossetia and Abkhazia, as you know, that they block the two most important north-south communications routes. This could have an impact both on the local level across the administrative boundaries, but also more widely. One could envisage, for example, also direct communications routes which have been discussed for a long time between Abkhazia and this country. Again, this requires a degree of trust that has not been present so far. So there are a lot of things that, and I think also not directly related to Abkhazia and South Ossetia. I think there are possibilities for a Georgian-Russian dialogue on a lot of other issues of common concern. The situation in the North Caucasus, for example, is, of course, a problem. Well, of course, a problem for Russia, but it's also potentially a problem for Georgia. And I think wider security issues could be part of this agenda. This, again, on the basic issues, I don't see any possibility for a move, but if one agrees on a kind of agree to disagree modus, there is actually quite a lot that can be done. Now, this also requires the international partners, not least the European Union, to step up to this challenge as well, because it will require a more active European policy than has been the case, at least in the last few years. After the Georgia War and the shock that this war created among the countries in Europe and elsewhere, the main focus on the activities of the EU have been, well, actually not only the EU, the international community in general, has been to basically refreeze these conflicts. This is a very attractive solution in the short term, at least in the perspective of a normal European electoral cycle. You make sure that you stabilize or cement the status quo in order to prevent any problems for emerging. You create arrangements that ensure this. Without really looking into the larger issues involved, and without really thinking about how the conflicts could be resolved, or even how smaller, less ambitious measures like those that I mentioned could be implemented. In the long run, of course, this is extremely dangerous, because if the conflicts are refrozen, it will be very difficult to unfreeze them in the future, and if you continue this freezing metaphor, cracks will develop under the ice that you don't see until the ice breaks up, and we may end up with a situation like the one that happened in August of 2008. So the EU and other international partners will need to take a much more active, and I would say proactive look at the conflicts in Georgia for these smaller developments to take place, and for a dynamic to be created that could point the direction towards some kind of development of what should I say, mutual interests. Now, this is about Georgia and the conflicts there. There's a lot to say also about Nagorno-Karabakh. I believe, and this is something that I warned repeatedly about when I had responsibility for this issue, that we are gradually, almost imperceptibly, moving towards a lower threshold for the use of military violence. I'm not necessarily talking about any deliberate large-scale use of force, but with the arms race that is going on, with the growing lack of trust, with the discourse that is becoming ever more vicious, the danger that any incident may run out of control increases with time. And the really nasty thing about this is that it's a very slow development. It happens almost imperceptibly. There's not very much to react to, and therefore the parties to the conflict and the international community, whose interests are growing dramatically in the region and in the countries involved, may very well find themselves in an uncontrollable situation at some point if nothing is done. So complacency here is quite a serious problem that needs to be dealt with. It's difficult because this conflict has seemingly been stable for the better part of 2 decades. And with everything else that's going on in the world, from Afghanistan to the Middle East, to focus attention on this tiny area where nobody has ever been, almost, at least not in Europe. This is a very tall order indeed, but it needs to be done before this conflict overwhelms us as well. There are lots of things that can be done. I have mentioned them in the past. I recommended to the EU also to take a closer look at early warning. There are several technical and political means that can be employed to this effect. There could be lots of measures to strengthen the ceasefire agreement, support the role of the OSCE in this regard, contingency planning of different kinds, confidence building with civil society and media. That is the one thing that is being done. Several things to strengthen confidence also on the ground through joint work on joint public services and so on, but also both more forceful messages from the European Union and others, combined with a higher degree of reassurances from the EU and a higher degree of interest through high-level visits and so on, a higher degree of work on regional cooperation, and also plans for the contribution that the EU and other international partners are prepared to make if and when some kind of agreement is struck. All these are things that could be done to change the dynamics. It's going to be on the margins, but since these increasing dangers that I talked about are on the margins in the first place, I think I'm convinced that if you work on the margins in order to improve the situation, that will actually have ultimately positive effects. So I hope I fulfill the expectations to be to change the dynamics slightly. I'm not a huge optimist, but I really think we have to look at whatever opportunities there are and make the most out of them.
Thank you very much, Peter. I think that is quite optimistic, especially from an EU or former EU official, and it's also very pragmatic and very realistic. So thank you very much for that. Ambassador Semneby has to leave us in, actually he should leave us now, but he can stay another 10 minutes. So what I'd like to do now is actually do a break in the panel and go to you, the audience, and ask you if you have any questions, particularly to Mr. Semneby because he has to leave, but any questions to this first part of the panel. I think we can do this for about 15 minutes of questions, and then we'll turn to our two remaining speakers who will focus more on Karabakh and Turkey-Armenia relations. So if we can stick now to questions that address particularly Ambassador Semneby or the Georgian-Russian conflict, I think that would be best. And then we'll have, at the end, another series of questions with the second part of the panel. Okay, all the way in the back.
This is a general question for everyone, but since the ambassador has to leave, I'll address it to him.
Can you just say who you are?
It's Boris Barkanoff from the Davis Center at Harvard. I'd like to ask you to think about this in more historical terms. In 50 years, what will historians say about the post-Soviet, or after the post-Cold War period? Was this... And in particular, from the EU perspective, has there been learning about this period and kind of the nature of international politics or that sort of thing?
I'm going to take a few questions. Yes?
Thanks a lot. National Institute for Strategic Studies. I have a question to Peter concerning the European Union role, especially in the Georgian conflict. For a very long time, we saw the European Union more working in the confidence-building measures and, let's say, on the ground, but not being involved in the real political mediation of the conflicts over there. Only events of the 2008 provoked in some way to be involved. For your opinion, what was the reason for this? It is the, let's say, philosophy of the European Union to be involved on the ground but not on the political level for the Caucasus conflicts, or it was just because of the lack of experience in the region that you were just opening for all capitals?
Neil McFarlane, Oxford. I guess I have a question for Ambassador Semneby and a little one for Professor Rondelli as well. The question for Ambassador Semneby is directly related to the process of negotiation on conflict resolution with respect to Karabakh. Does he believe that the Minsk group remains a viable negotiating framework for the Karabakh process? And if not, what would he suggest as an alternative? As for Alex, I'm just curious what you think about Ambassador Semneby's suggestion that the possibility of cooperation with Russia over North Caucasian issues is a viable approach to the gradual improvement not only of Georgia-Russia relations, but also of relations between Georgia and North Caucasian peoples. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fyodor Lukyanov, the Russian Global Affairs Journal. I have a question for Peter. Since you have now experience not only in Caucasus but partly in Afghanistan, so all major powers pretending or having ambitions to play a political role have now financial limitations due to economic crisis, due to all problems they have. How you can estimate, as an expert, dynamics of European Union ability to spend money on different conflicts, and in case European Union will cut, which areas are more likely to suffer? Is it Caucasus, Afghanistan, or something else?
Okay, I think that's enough.
Well, that's something to think about. If I would, history, what the historians would write in 50 years, I have no idea. We are still right in the middle of a historical process that started basically in 1989, and it's not finished yet. I think possibly that the historians will write that this was enabled the European, the Central European countries to overcome the consequences and divisions of World War II. I think it will be described as a success story. but we still don't really know what will ultimately happen in areas further east. The countries immediately to the east of the Central European countries, belt from Belarus to Azerbaijan. We don't know really what direction developments will take in Russia itself. I can only hope that that the next 30 years will also enable the historians to, or the next few decades will enable the historians to make positive assessment of this period, and that it's enabled all these countries to develop democratic systems with shared values and so on and so on. And that we will not have any serious violent conflicts meanwhile. Now the role of the European Union and why it did not act more proactively in the period preceding 2008. Well, I was very much involved myself in all kinds of efforts during this period, and I think it's no secret that the EU countries were of different minds what should be done, and how present, how active the European Union should be in this area. There were divisions within the European Union that of several different kinds. It was quite amazing, I found, how many fault lines opened up over these issues. We had obviously the fault line about policy vis-à-vis Russia, whether the European Union should be present on the ground in countries that were on Russia's immediate border. We had divisions between large and smaller EU countries that didn't necessarily have to do with that particular issue, whether it was dangerous or not for the EU to be present in the border areas, but that had more to do with the sense in many large EU countries that relations with Russia were so important that they should rather be the prerogatives of the bilateral realm of those countries. We had divisions between the northwest of Europe or the northeast of Europe and the southwest of Europe that had sort of, largely a north-south divide that had to do with division of resources between the eastern and the southern neighborhoods. We had divisions between new and old member states of the European Union that had very much to do with security perceptions and also with historical experiences over the course of the last half century. And you can imagine that this was a very difficult environment to work in. If I would mention my single largest surprise in my job as a EU Special Representative was how much time I had to spend in mediating between different positions and opinions between the EU member states. It was every bit as difficult as mediating and facilitating conflicts in the Caucasus, I tell you. On Karabakh, is the Minsk Group viable? What is the alternative? I don't really want to comment on the. I'm not the USR anymore, but I have some responsibilities still. I think there's still the potential that whatever I say can make headlines, and obviously the Minsk Group has moved from a conflict resolution modus to a conflict prevention modus. It has filled the role in terms of preventing conflict. If the Minsk Group had not existed, the situation would have been worse, and it could easily have gotten out of control much earlier. But we have to think about what needs to be done, and we have to think without any preconditions, I think, what needs to be done in order to move from conflict prevention to conflict resolution. That needs to that reflection also needs to take into account what the international community is prepared to contribute and offer in terms of pushing and following such a process towards conflict resolution. It requires a much larger investment, a much larger political investment than has been the case so far. Now, the dynamics of the EU ability today to deal with these conflicts. Well, to a large extent, it's about attention being diverted to other issues, and not least internal issues in the EU, the financial crisis being the most important of them. But it's also about political will. It's also about structural issues in terms of how the European Union is organized and how the Lisbon Treaty is being implemented and so on. I would say even with other issues on the agenda, I think there is potential for a little bit more of visionary and strategic thinking. I talked with, I recall that I participated not too long ago in a dinner in Brussels with the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the European Parliament, Elmar Brok, who mentioned that the most important deficit today in the EU, in the way it's organized in terms of its foreign policy, is what he called the courage to fail. You need to, when you work on certain, when you address certain issues, it's not really enough in this negotiation environment that prevails in Brussels to anticipate the least common denominator, as is often the case today. You need to be a bit more visionary, and you need to be a bit more daring than that. If you're not, if you don't take initiatives that are a bit risky, then you will never address the really tricky, the really important and difficult problems. And the conflicts in the Caucasus are certainly examples of such issues that require a little more daring and courage to fail.
Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you very much for joining us all the way from Kabul. I think you better leave now, or else you probably won't make your plane and you won't get your accreditation. So thank you very much, and we hope to see you again in Istanbul soon.
Thank you very much.
I have to answer Professor Makale's question. It's very difficult to answer. It's simple and very complicated. Our relationship with North Caucasian nations have its ups and downs. We helped Russia to conquer the Caucasus, North Caucasus, and then 20th century Russians used them against us. And there are mixed feelings, but we look at North Caucasus as number one problem, national security problem, potential. Our relations with Turkey, our border with Turkey is exemplary. Our relations with Armenia, Azerbaijan are very good also. We have no threats from the borders. The only problem is Russian border, because North Caucasus is there. It's a long border with very complicated, the terrain is very conducive to many bad things, and just recent events, just a month ago, show that everything can happen there. Our interest is to improve image in the North Caucasus, image of Georgia, because for a long time they were under the Moscow's Kremlin propaganda that were bad and so on. So it's not very easy, and the Georgian government makes attempts to improve relations with North Caucasian nations through certain steps. Some steps are irritative for Russians, some steps no less. But believe me, just media and some idiots in our government sell it as a attempt to irritate Russia. Not at all. It's very serious to improve relations with these North Caucasian nations. When it comes to, because we understand the importance of North Caucasus from national security point of view, when it comes to cooperation with Russia, this cooperation can have different ways. One way is to help Russia in military and anti-insurgent operations in North Caucasus. It's absolutely excluded. Shevardnadze was asked to do it. He rejected. Saakashvili was asked by Mr. Putin to do it, and he rejected it. They are our neighbors. Everyone comes and goes. We remain. We have to respect our neighbors. This is very important. We are a small, weak country. And also, God forbid, some there was talk about that if Russia disintegrates. Can you imagine what happens to poor Georgia if North Caucasus loses any kind of order? So, I think that Neil, the question is just in bullseye. We have to try to cooperate with Russia, but it's very delicate issue. And we have to do it in a way not to irritate our North Caucasian neighbors. Because we have historical relations with them, long relations, very complicated. And it would be disaster for Georgia. It's committing suicide in order to improve relations with Russia to be used against North Caucasians. So it depends on new Georgian leadership, how they continue these relations, how they develop it. I think that we can cooperate with Russia in everything, but we have to be very careful. And also we have to see not pure interest to use Georgia, but just cooperation with not zero-sum result, but win-win result. But it's difficult with Russia because of capacities are different, and security symmetry doesn't exist. But it's possible, but it would be a very difficult way to do it. Thanks.
Alexei, do you want to answer this question as well?
Well, one question was about what people will think about ourselves in 50 years, yes? I don't know, because nobody could predict 50 years the collapse of the Soviet Union, China is a superpower, Islamization of the world, and so on. This is the first part of my answer. And the second part is how will I think? What kind of Chinese, what kind of Russians, and what kind of Muslims? So it's impossible practically to imagine. To my mind, maybe these years will be considered as the second stage of the collapse of the Soviet Union. Maybe is last 20 years and future years is I don't know how to call this process, the radicalization of Islam, because indeed it's a phenomenon. We don't know it will lead to what, but anyway, it's really interesting. And short appendix to the Caucasus, to the North Caucasus. I totally agree with you, but I want to add the only one thing. It's very dangerous for Georgia to cooperate with Russia, because this cooperation will be directed against somebody. We know who is this somebody, and they are very dangerous people.
Thank very much. We touched a little bit on Nagorno-Karabakh with Peter Semneby's talk, but we now have here Richard Bogosian, who is based in Armenia, and who's the director of the Regional Studies Center. He is a very, very well-versed expert on Nagorno-Karabakh, so I'd like him to give us a bit of an update on the situation there.
Thank you, Sabine. To be honest, there's very little, if anything, to say about the situation or outlook regarding Nagorno-Karabakh. But I do want to begin with an indictment of the current situation. Specifically, the indictment stems from the fact that for too long, people of the region have been looking to others to resolve their conflicts. For too long, people outside the region have been exploiting the conflicts. And for too long, people of the region are looking to blame others for the conflict. This situation leads to three specific dangers for the people of the region. The first is the danger of more instability, where hostilities only escalate. The second danger is of deeper isolation, where borders remain closed and sealed. Third, the danger of greater insignificance, where no one really cares anymore about the South Caucasus. But I only have 2 points to make, and I will be brief. The first centering on the obstacles. Yes, there are obstacles, but also secondly, focusing on the opportunities. And I would argue there are opportunities. But first, there are 5 specific obstacles to the situation regarding conflicts in the region. The first, of course, the most obvious, political, where for too long the region has been ruled by strongmen in the absence of statesmen or stateswomen. At the same time, we see governments ruling mostly by self-interest, not national interest, where a lack of political will and an absence of strategic vision is the norm, unfortunately. In many ways, all politicians of the region, until recently, have been very much prisoners of their own outdated nationalist discourse. And the militants have long ago crowded out the moderate voices. But in many ways, one lesson in politics from this region, in many ways, unfortunately, is the revealing difference between ruling the region and governing the region. Secondly, in terms of obstacles, is the economic, where powerfully entrenched vested interests, so-called oligarchs, have, based on commodity-based cartels, have come to reign and flourish amid closed borders and economics of scarcity. At the same time, we see the economics of the region based on profiteering, pillaging, plundering, the piracy. It's not pirates of the Penzance, it's pirates of the South Caucasus. But at the same time, we also see a lack of economic incentives for conflict resolution. Third is, of course, social. One important lesson from Armenian-Turkish normalization was that neither Armenia nor Turkey did enough to prepare their civil society for normalization. In other words, in the social context, in many cases, civil society is not very civil to each other or to their neighbors. The fourth obstacle, of course, is diplomatic, where the Minsk group is too much Minsk, very closed and secretive, and not enough group. In many ways, it's exclusive, it's elite-based, and exclusionary. And fifth, of course, military security is a primary obstacle. Military security is an obstacle based on what is wrong with the situation, based on threat misperception, based on inappropriate force posture, and the threat of war by accident. But my second point is identifying the same 5 themes, but looking and highlighting opportunities. And I do see opportunities. The first in political context. There is an opportunity of the Mohicans in Armenia, it's Shakespeare in Azerbaijan. Father to son, genetic politics, Lady Macbeth is in the wings. It's very entertaining, but very dangerous. But if we look at Georgia as an important peaceful precedent, where, to give credit to President Saakashvili, it's the peaceful transfer of power from the incumbent to the opposition that must be stressed and noted as an important new political precedent. And we need to highlight patriotism, not nationalism. Patriotism based on pride of one's nation, rather than nationalism based on hatred of the other. The second area is economic, where there are finite limits. The systems as we know it can no longer sustain themselves. And fortunately, reforms, whether desired or not by many of the elites, are only necessary for survival. Third, in terms of social, Armenia-Turkey is one example of progress, in my opinion, where despite the lack of closed borders, as Alexander Iskandarian always notes, closed borders have not yet opened, but mental borders have. And this is very important in how far we've come. And in terms of the fourth area, diplomatic. Track 2 diplomacy may be laughed at in some circles, but I would stress it is the underpinning foundation to give political cover and to pressure and advocate political leaders to move forward in terms of diplomatic negotiations. At the same time, track 2 diplomacy is all the more important as the OSCE peace process has stalled. Fifth, in terms of military security, let's be honest, it's only a negative trend. I see little in terms of opportunity, except the fact that the balance of power is shifting. But finally, what I do want to note, and to close with an indictment of the current situation, is that we're talking about 20 years. Historically, from a historian's point of view, that's nothing. But for us, living in the region, 20 years of this situation means that there's no more room for excuses, and there shouldn't be any more excuses. Thank you.
We are now going to quickly move to the final speaker of today, who is also, I should say, in some ways our host, since she's from here in Istanbul, from Turkey. Sabiha Senucel is from TESEV and will be speaking to us a bit about what Turkey's role can be in the region in helping to resolve these conflicts.
Thank you. I can be rather short, being the very last speaker of a very long day, and actually just take your questions and go. The very short answer to Samin's point is that whether Turkey can be helpful to any conflict resolution in the region is yes and no from where you are looking at the picture. The situation in Turkey is that Turkey will continue its very active foreign policy for the foreseeable 10 years till 2023. This is for sure. But then one point, this is also for sure, is that South Caucasus will play a limited role in this foreign policy. So from which angle you are looking at, you can say that this is positive. If you're an Armenian, maybe you can say that it is better that Turkey takes distance off from the region so that it doesn't complicate anything more. But maybe from an Azeri or from a Georgian perspective, one might want that Turkey realizes its unrealized potential in the region, as some argue, and comes back more to the region and helps to more conflict resolution. Getting back to Turkey's relations, I mean, why I'm saying that? I mean, first of all, we have to really note that there is a very loaded agenda in Turkey for the coming 3-4 years. And this is why I am pessimistic that Turkey is going to take any more risks in any other region. It is already taking many risks in the Middle East region. So it will be twice more careful not to go into any adventures in any other region. So this really leaves us a very little flexibility to assume that Turkey is going to take any radical step to normalizing its relations with Armenia. And on Nagorno-Karabakh, in the three major conflicts of the region, Nagorno-Karabakh is the one Turkey's name is aligned more with. But in that, Turkey, since it is not a neutral actor, it is very limited what Turkey can do without really risking its official line that it has been pursuing for the last 20 years. On Turkey-Armenia track, we were really hopeful like 3 years ago while we were discussing in Istanbul, in Armenia. But then the protocols collapsed. And now what we have in our hands is that in Armenia and in Turkey, two disappointed societies and party bureaucracies, that if the process is again to start, it will be much more difficult to rebuild trust. I mean, this Turkey-Armenia, it has been always very fragile, and then with now the collapse of the recent most positive initiative of the last decades, it will be even more difficult to start a new one. But looking at it from a positive side, both sides and the international community actually learned that they really need to invest much more effort, as Richard also underlined, if we are to make a success the normalization between Turkey and Armenia. Without a normalization in this track, I don't see a role for Turkey playing a positive role for Turkey in the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. It is not going to do that. And with Azerbaijan, from Turkey and Azerbaijani perspective, there is a positive boundaries. I mean, the relations between Turkey and Azerbaijan have been falling out for some period. After the collapse of the protocols, now they solidified their relations. There are huge investments being made from Azerbaijan to Turkey and from Turkey to Azerbaijan. So, I mean, the relations are solidified between Turkey and Azerbaijan. Again, from which angle you are looking at it, you can say that this is positive or this is negative. And Russia, being the most dominant and most important actor as far as Turkey's foreign policy is also a concern. Turkey and Russia talk much on economics, much on energy politics, but they talk very little on the issues that they are not able to agree. This is an agreement that they make between Turkey and Russia. The bilateral relations at the economic angle, at the energy level, it will continue, but Nagorno-Karabakh is not the issue that they are not at all, and they are not able to agree on. It is the Cyprus question, that it is now Syria, the big picture in the Middle East, that they are not able to share the common perspective. But regardless of these issues, they are enhancing their bilateral relations. Yes, as we faced 2 days ago, there will be some, like crisis in that line. But still, as far as I can see, the relationship will continue. And in that all big picture, unfortunately, it is very difficult to really separate Turkey's foreign policy, its Caucasus, its Middle East. It is too much interlinked. So while we are talking of this big region in the east part of Turkey, southeast part of Turkey, Turkey will be very careful with its relations with Russia, and it's not going to take any risk in that angle as well. Having this domestic structure in our hands, Prime Minister Erdogan now, hoping to be the president, maybe, we don't know, what will be, but definitely there is a struggle, there will be a struggle going on, and of course they will not take any risks while having this very tough domestic agenda inside. So this really leaves us a very little flexibility on what Turkey can do to promote in terms of its South Caucasus politics is concerned. What will Turkey do is that it will only take the steps that it will invest little but gain more. This can be maybe being a mediator between Georgia and Russia with this after the election results in Georgia. No one knows about this eventually much, but there are hopes that this can be an opportunity and Turkey can play a role between Russia and Georgia, and maybe this can be one of the possibilities Turkey can do. But of course, this is the short. This is for the short term. If you are looking at more long-term to the picture, and if we are enlarging our spectrum, not only the official line, but also to societies, to civil society, this is the part that I have the belief, and that's why I have been also working on it for the last couple of years. At the civil society level, there is much the societies can do. There is much we can do. We have done. I mean, I cannot say that we have overcome all the barriers in Turkey-Armenia relations, but at the societal level, really we broke a lot of taboos between Turkey and Armenia. There is still a lot to discuss, there is still a lot to go, I admit that. But it has been a successful track. If we are able to enlarge this track to dialogue with Georgia, dialogue with Azerbaijan, it can prove some results. Maybe I'm too optimistic in that. I'm really pessimistic at the official line, but maybe I'm too optimistic at the civil society level and at the second track level. We'll see, but also it is all up to us whether to make it happen or not. If we also lose the belief in that, then the picture is more pessimistic to me. We are really left with very little things in our hands. What can bring radically Turkey back to the region is that a crisis. Recently, Turkey's Caucasus policy is, to me, it is crisis-driven. If there is a crisis, like we had in 2008, yes, of course, Turkey will be one of the forefront players with that. But whether we want it or not, it's a big question mark. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sabiha. We have now about 20 minutes for questions and answers. So I hope that we still have more questions to analysts.
Kadir, University of Westminster. I think it's quite indicative how little one very important power was mentioned during this roundtable, the United States. What has happened over the past 5 years? I mean, 5 years ago, Sergei Lavrov described Georgia as the pet project of the George W. Bush administration. Now suddenly, America seems to have become completely irrelevant to the region. So what is the United States' role in the Caucasus today, specifically related to the conference? Thank you.
We'll take a few questions.
Emre Sheikh from IR Department, Kadir Has University. I have a question for Richard. Richard, you mentioned that while you were explaining the reasons for the failure of protocols, you mentioned that governments did not prepare society. So do you think it's intentional and governments were actually just pretending that there's normalization process? Or there's no plan? Or there are not plans? Thanks.
Anybody on this side?
I have a question for Turkish colleague. You mentioned that Turkish policy vis-à-vis Southern Caucasus is mainly crisis-driven, but more generally, could you describe could you range priorities for Turkish diplomacy in case of no crisis, if we take the whole entourage? Or is it always crisis-driven? So now it's crisis in Syria, Syria's priority. If it will be crisis in Nagorno-Karabakh is priority. How conceptually it's shaped?
I'm Pavel Bayev from Prior, and I want to take a measure of Alexei's pessimism. Generally saying that this conflict cannot be resolved is not a very pessimistic perspective, because things can get much worse. And I want to ask you, can you imagine a new conflict emerging there? It might help in solving the old ones. In the Caucasus.
Any other questions? Good. Yes, in the back.
Thank you. Benedict Hastel from the Russian Eurasian East European Studies Center at the Kras University. I have a question concerning the European policies towards conflict resolution in the South Caucasus. I was wondering how the discussants think about the European policy of engagement without recognition as some kind of alternative approach to conflict mechanism, which is not necessarily in this dichotomy between independence of the statelets on the one hand or territorial integrity of Georgia or Azerbaijan on the other hand. Thank you.
My question is to all three, four presenters, 5, 6, 7. You told about conflicts at Caucasus, about 3 conflicts at Caucasus. Do you think really that there is no difference? Do you think that, for example, a conflict on South Ossetia and Abkhazia and Karabakh are different from human point of view of possibility of resolving? What differences between 3 conflicts is possible, even shortly?
Okay. I think I will go in the reverse order, if that's okay, Sabiha? Okay, so Sabiha will start answering the questions.
One question directly coming from you. I should be more specific. I meant that Turkey's foreign policy is crisis-driven as far as the South Caucasus is concerned. And of course, if you have a crisis such as Syria, you cannot avoid to be involved in the crisis. As far as the South Caucasus is concerned, I think it will continue to be crisis-driven. But if there is no crisis, the priority will be economy, and Turkey's economic relations. And this is not only for the South Caucasus, by the way. I mean, you know that these big mottos that Foreign Minister Davutoğlu has, and economy has a very important role in these all foreign policy initiatives. Turkey's foreign policy is not only, but very much economy-driven. It will continue to be economy-driven as well. So, for its vital economic interests, Turkey is not will go into any adventures in the South Caucasus. My take. Not now.
I'm going to take the questions in order. Yes, no, maybe, and yes. We're all very tired. I wanted to make you laugh, but it didn't work. But more seriously, I'm sorry. Continuing a strange American humor, let me take the question on U.S. policy. Because U.S. policy deserved the attention it got today. There is no U.S. policy in the Caucasus. It's very much a subset of U.S.-Russian policy. It's very much a symptom of U.S.-Turkish policy and an afterthought of U.S.-Iranian policy. And from an American perspective, I'm not very encouraged that it's going to return to the policy agenda anytime soon. Another question regarding Armenian-Turkish normalization and civil society. Actually, I think both Turkey, in its usual rather arrogant approach, failed to take into account the need to bring in civil society to prepare for the protocol process. The Armenian side, similar to the Turkish side, didn't really care, it seemed, in terms of preparing the groundwork in advance. What's interesting about Armenia and Turkey, though, was the process of normalization was very similar, much to the shock or surprise of many, in that it was a decision-making process very secretive, very closed, contained within the Armenian president's office only, and on the Turkish side, limited to the president's office, and sometimes the foreign ministry and prime minister's office. Meaning that it was perhaps doomed from the beginning in terms of a very small and limited number of stakeholders in fulfilling and implementing the protocols. Another question regarding the EU, I think the policy of engagement without recognition is probably long overdue. I mean, our one token Swedish diplomat has left, but in the words of Carl Bildt on Nagorno-Karabakh, Nagorno-Karabakh is the only conflict in wider Europe where the EU has no role to play whatsoever, and that's a mistake and must change. And finally, Pavel raises an interesting point, and let me be provocative. At the risk of losing popularity, let me be provocative. It may require another war over Nagorno-Karabakh before the situation can change. In other words, the two sides see the conflict itself very differently. From Azerbaijan's perspective, it may have lost the battle but not the war, whereas the Armenian side sees the Nagorno-Karabakh war as fully concluded. And to be honest, coming from Armenia, part of the problem from an Armenian perspective is Nagorno-Karabakh is Armenia's first military victory in, 1,000 years? It's very hard to climb back down from that.
I think Georgia has won more battles, no?
Georgia is a beacon of democracy.
Well, you asked about conflicts, potential conflicts in the Caucasus, yes? It's possible, because the situation still depends on, not on Russia, but on some Russian leaders who are unpredictable. Well, in 1992, nobody could predict the Chechen War. The same year, nobody could predict the war between Georgia and Russia. 20 years ago, it sounded like a stupidity, something unbelievable, impossible, yes? Now we have some perspective. It doesn't mean that it will happen, but who knows? For instance, the frontier between Russia and Azerbaijan. 10 years ago, they spoke about Lesginistan. Maybe you know, yes? A new state with 500,000 of population. Still, somebody in Dagestan continues to think that maybe in the future that will be possible. Yeah. Besides, we don't know how it will go in the north. Yes, I mean in Caucasus, because of a lot of reasons, and that's true. Also, I think we'll get next years, and on the eve of Olympic Games, and after them, some short conflicts, and they will give up shots to the south. Yes. So we can imagine, we can speculate, but in any case, I don't believe that Caucasus and its north part and south part will be the zone of stability. So we have to be ready. Even I don't want to mention the problem of impact of Middle East to Muslim zones of some Caucasus. Yes, so the situation is very, very, I would say, exciting. And the question was, Sabir said, like, about similarity between conflicts or difference. Well, to be very cynic and pragmatic. Look, Abkhazia and Ossetia is a part of Russia. Nagorno-Karabakh is a part of Armenia. Similarity, yes? Nagorno-Karabakh will never go back to Azerbaijan, yes? Abkhazia and Ossetia will never go to Georgia, despite all negotiations, all improvements. Never will go to Georgia. Well, if I were Putin, I'll give immediately back to Georgia with all kinds of their programs, and I would be very glad, but I'm not Putin. Yeah? So, one thing, come on, it's a topic for another conference. Well, and as far as Abkhazia, just I don't want to exaggerate its future, but maybe this is the only one territory which has a certain, very slight, some chance to be something, well, semi-independent, maybe. But as to the rest,
I think that if we give us Kuril Islands, we will sell to Japan, everyone will be happy.
If nobody else has a burning last remark or last question to make, I think that we will thank very much our presenters today and the organizers of this conference, the Academic Swiss Caucasus Net and Kadir Has University. Thank you very much for having us, and panelists, thank you very much for coming, some of you from far away, to be able to be here tonight.